Today we're speaking about something that is pretty common, and it's called a doorknob comment. And we're going to be speaking about what that looks like. But I think let's start off, Rory. Can you just tell us, what do we mean? What is a doorknob comment? Give us a definition.
Well, a doorknob comment, usually in my experience, is something the client says as they're leaving the session. They put their hand on the handle of the door or the doorknob, and as they come to open it, they drop a bombshell before disappearing through the door and leaving the building. An example I will give, many years ago, I was working with a client, and as they got up, they opened the door and they said, and of course, I'm £50,000 in debt, before shutting the door and exiting the building. And it was just dropped in the room. It just landed in the room. And next week, through that arc of that week, I had to consider, did I bring that topic up? And what I did was, when they came in, I welcomed them and we got past the niceties of, yes, it's raining outside and the bus is late. I said, I'm just aware that when you left last week, you alluded to the fact that you had a bit of money problems. Is that something you want to look at? And the client's intake of breath as she was able to speak about something that it turned out she was ashamed of and frightened of talking about was palpable. And that really set the direction of the therapy from then on. Always a theme in therapy, Ken. Someone comes with a presenting issue, but as the therapy emerges, what they actually came for isn't actually the problem that they came for. It was the debt that was the problem, not what she actually came for, but she was too ashamed to speak about it. And we came to the ending of the sessions in ways that she may be able to live with the fact that she was effectively in some financial difficulty.
Yeah, it's interesting. So you gave us the definition and you've used an example that I know that you've sanitized from your own practice to remove identifiers. But I think I want to start by saying this is a metaphorical doorknob. Doesn't mean that they have to be touching, closing the door as they do. It's a metaphorical doorknob. We call it doorknob as in just as they're leaving and they're touching that door, they say blah, 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 and then leave the room and drop that on us. But they don't have to. They can be when there's 3 minutes left in the session. They might bring something that is so big that in no way is going to fit into that session. And it is their right to do so. There is some thinking that suggests as we start getting to the end of the session, this burning weight that this person has been feeling and carrying and not wanting to share with anybody, but I need to get this out, might be a rush from them to get this information out into the room. Get it off your chest. I think we're told at some stage in our life that it's going to make you feel better. And I think the first thing to do with the doorknob comment is to hold the client. And this may take a few moments. So we don't want to be taking a client to a point in the session where they open up into a incredible vein of content that they've maybe been keeping subdued for some time, only for us to say, we can certainly have a look at that in our next session. Bye. I think we would check with them. How are you feeling? Are you okay? And look at their support networks because they've brought it right there. And then, as you mentioned, Rory, you say you may choose to touch on it in your next session. Now, I'm going to caveat here. In your case, Rory, you touched on it, but you touched on it in a beautiful way. You said, I'm just mindful that as we ended our last session, as you were leaving or whatever it may be, you said X, Y, and Z. I wondered if you wanted to bring that today or if anything else was on your mind. And this gives the client the choice. It's not us bringing the agenda. It's not our agenda. It's theirs because they left it with us the last time they were there. But they may have felt differently then to how they feel now. It's the client's agenda, not our agenda. And the danger of us as therapists introducing our agenda. If the client leaves and they said X, Y, Z at the door, and I next week say, hey, you said X, Y, Z at the door, let's look at that this week. They might not want to. They might want to speak about something else that's going on in their life. Put it in your notes, note it, definitely touch back there, but also be prepared to let it go if the client chooses to let that go. So there we go. We know what it is. We know what it looks like. Why? What's the psychology behind? Why would somebody do this, Rory? What's your thinking on that?
I think that clients may carry lots of difficulties with them that they're ashamed to disclose, or that when they have disclosed them in the past to others, they've been judged harshly or told that they shouldn't have these thoughts or feelings. And they do it for a protective purpose so that they can literally escape if it becomes too difficult. And in my view, last minute disclosures should be handled with care, because the person who discloses is likely to be quite vulnerable at that point. I think to sum up, Ken, it's a safe way of being vulnerable. They can be vulnerable, and if it becomes too overwhelming, they can make an exit.
Yeah. And it goes back into that all behavior is goal directed. There's a safety in dropping that with maybe even a subconscious understanding that there's not enough time to really go to any depth in that. It can also just be a wanting to get it off the chest, dropping it in.
Yeah.
Fear of judgment from you, the therapist. I'm going to put this in and I'm going to see how this therapist reacts. I'm going to tell them this dark secret that I've been carrying. I'm going to see how they react when I drop that on them. And it might be them testing the water. And I was thinking, I was recently looking at some of the work of John Schuler, and we're talking about the disinhibition effect. The disinhibition effect is something that we see online. You'll be well versed in this, Rory. It's when somebody feels that there is a distance between them and the person that they're communicating with, so they can bring stuff that they might not ordinarily bring. And I wonder if there couldn't be an element of that in dropping something with thinking there's not enough time. I'm going to drop this and then I'm going out of this room now. I'm going to remove myself from that and what plays out on that. And at least this person knows now. We'll see how they react when I next see them. But this is all stuff that's just going around in my head on this topic, Rory.
Yeah. And it can also be something called help now, which is not uncommon in trauma-informed work, where somebody becomes so overwhelmed with something within the therapy session that as they go, they drop something. And I've had on more than one occasion a client's exiting remarks as, I'm going to take my own life. I've had that on, I would think, a couple of occasions over my practice. And I now know that to be help now. That's someone who's so overwhelmed with what's going on, who's burdened, that the only thing they can see is that they need to take their own lives. I've certainly worked with it with supervisees who brought it. And that help now effectively means they're literally sending out an SOS. They're literally saying, I just can't go on. In which case, obviously, if it's something about taking life or hurting others, then you have to make the time to see what you can do to keep them safe. And if you're working in an agency, the contract will always say harm to self or harm to others, in which case it may be a time just to ask the client to sit back down again, just bring them back into the here and now, and maybe go and find someone more experienced and be able to get the support we need. When I worked in the agency I worked in, on a number of occasions, therapists would come out and speak to someone, and they'd eventually have to call an ambulance or get a taxi and take the client to A&E to speak with the psychiatric nurse, because the risk of them taking their lives was so profound. So I think the message to, if you are a student, it's worth having a chat of, who do I go to if this happens, if this last minute disclosure is about taking life or hurting others, because it's really good to have in place, isn't it?
It is. And I'm going to put in here that I hope that you never do find yourself in that situation as a student.
Yeah.
You're working in an agency or an establishment, they will be putting in a robust assessment process and assessing the needs of that client and directing them to you. And if their needs are that complex, they should be picked up in that assessment, but they can slip through. And there are times when we have to respond to emergencies in counselling. And as you said, it's harm to self, harm to others. It can also be harm to that person who's sitting in front of you. They might say, I'm going back into an abusive relationship. There's a whole lot of things that can play out in that. You're 100%, Rory, in what you've advised here. As students, what you want to know is your policies and your procedures within the agencies you're working in. You're going to be writing about them in your assignments anyway, so it's really worth, when you first get in, getting them, reading them through, asking all the questions you need to ask to be able to clarify that, and bring up topics like this that you hear. Challenge your agency, say what happens when this happens, and get them to, if it's not in their policies, procedures or referral processes, get them to tell you. As we've said so often, as a placement practitioner, when you go in there, you are in practice. It's your practice. It's yours. Even though you're in placement and you're working within the agency, it's still you that is there in the room with that person.